Hi there, this is Scott Nicholson from Syracuse University's School of Information Studies. In today's session of the Games and Libraries course, I'm going to be talking a little bit about history. I've done some research going back into time and trying to figure out when libraries have interacted with games. And I got interested in this research because of an article that one of my students found for me, actually that traced gaming in libraries back to the UK in the 1800s. Now, at that point, libraries were designed as places for moral betterment. So people got together, they built a collection of resources, and they encouraged other people to come and access those resources so they could improve themselves. So libraries built smoking halls and billiards parlors and game rooms. And the idea was to lure people out of the public houses, lure them away from wine and women and song and into the library where there's a context, that library context, where they could engage in the same fun activities but in a better context for their lives. Now, in the United States, in the 1850s, we had the first library that brought in chess, and that was actually in San Francisco. What went on is this library actually had a chess room, and that chess club is actually the oldest ongoing chess club still in the United States, and it still meets in this library in San Francisco. So we've been supporting games for a long time. Actually, chess in libraries has been around all of that time. So gaming has been supported in libraries. Now, chess has been one of the more popular ways, but it's not always been fully accepted. In 1992, there was a case in New Rochelle, New York, where the library actually had a patron arrested for playing chess. They asked him to stop playing chess. He then started working out chess puzzles in a book, and they called the police, and he was arrested, and it was a big to-do. So libraries have not always had this blanket acceptance of chess and other gaming, but hopefully that wouldn't happen now. Now, going back to the time of the Great Depression, we saw two types of support of gaming activities in libraries. The first was toy and game libraries. And so in California and Los Angeles, the first ever toy and game library was founded. And the idea was to allow children who didn't have access to toys and games to have access to them. And still to this day, there's a number of toy libraries that are out there around the world. And some public libraries here are in partnership with toy libraries. And so they check out not only books, but also toys and games as part of their collections. Another interesting thing that happened during the Great Depression is that there was an onslaught of puzzles. People could do puzzles as contests to win money. And what happened is these puzzles required people to do research. And at that point, you couldn't hop onto Google or Wikipedia. The people went to the library. Libraries were inundated with patrons looking up answers to puzzles. Now, libraries had to make several choices. They had to decide either A, they're going to support this, or B, they're not. Some libraries said, no, we will not answer your questions dealing with puzzles, and turn those patrons away. Other libraries helped them and even took it as an opportunity, because the puzzles tended to have people all going for the same resource. That resource would sometimes get damaged in the heavy use. So what some libraries did is they took the books that had the answers, they put them all under glass in displays with the pages open to the page with the answers. And so it's two very different models of accepting this game-like activity in a library. Some libraries saying, no, you can't play games on our web-based computers. Huh? How's that for a comparison? And some libraries are saying, sure, come in and play games. Same thing. You know you can't have access to puzzle help. Yes, come on, not only will we help you, we'll point you right to the answers. And so we face these same issues that we face today, even back then. So this is nothing new. Now, as I talked about in the last episode, there are some games that are subject of collections. So, for example, 1923, the Haynes Checkers collection was from Providence Public Library. And a little bit later, the Yale Playing Card Collection was founded. And so we have the special collections. The Brown Popular Culture Library in the 60s was founded and began bringing in games. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas has a whole gaming research center. And so special collections and tied into games is something that's been around since the 20s and will continue to be around. Another place where gaming has intersected libraries is in school libraries. In fact, our research turned up in 1920. The American Library Association's document for school libraries told them to use storytelling and book games as part of what they supported. Games as a tool to use in the classroom have been part of the curriculum development that libraries do. If you look over time, you'll see things from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, in ERIC documents in the field, and instructions that tell school librarians how to integrate games into their curriculum. Now, what's changed is now we're seeing school libraries have recreational gaming clubs, which allow students who like to play games to find other folks, to be able to talk with them and feel like they have a place in the library. Now, Digital games have also had a long history in libraries. Tracing it back to the late 70s, the early 80s, we see libraries using games as part of what the services they offer. Some of the early computer labs had games as a way of getting people comfortable with the libraries. In fact, 1980, from the Menlo Park Library, they had a gaming program where they brought in kids to allow them to play games, and they even found at that point that they said it upped the use of other library facilities considerably. So even back then, we were using electronic games as a way of people getting engaged with the library. In the early 80s, some libraries had Atari 2600 circulating collections and days where people could come in and trade games with each other. In the 90s, we began using a lot of CD-ROM games and things like that. So libraries have actually had games as part of what their offerings are for a long time. It is not something that is new. We see reports about intergenerational gaming programs, that games are a great way to bring in multiple generations. But even we've been at that for a while. I found from the 80s there was a book called Intergenerational Programming in Libraries that talked about different types of game programs. Games where the seniors come in and teach games from their youth to kids, or games that engage the different groups together. So we've been doing this for some time. So to summarize, we've been doing games in libraries for a while. It was in the UK and the US in the 1800s in forms of chess and traditional board games, and through the early 1900s we had the Great Depression and the need for toy libraries and game libraries. We supported puzzles. We continued supporting traditional games. Then electronic games came in and we began supporting electronic games, and so we've been doing this for over a century. Gaming is not new in libraries, and that's the main message of today's session that you can take away. With someone saying, well, why are libraries so interested in gaming? Your answer is, we've been interested in gaming. It's part of what we do. And so that's a thing to remember. Gaming is not something new in libraries. So, if you want to talk about this episode, you can find a discussion forum right here. Go and chat about what I've talked about here. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about some of the ways that libraries have incorporated gaming as evidenced in some of the surveys that I've been doing of gaming in libraries. So until then, see ya.